I'm Duncan McLeod, and this is TechCentral's TCS Plus, the business technology show, which is brought to you today by First Distribution and Silicon Overdrive. Now, we're going to be talking about the future of database management in the cloud today, and my guests who are going to be going through that are Preegan Chetty, Microsoft Azure Product Manager at First Distribution, and he's joined by Jody Roberts, Microsoft Business Executive at Silicon Overdrive. Welcome to both of you, and thanks for making the time.
Thank you very much for having us.
I love the name of your company, Jody. Tell me a bit more about Silicon Overdrive and what it does.
So Silicon Overdrive originally started in 1995 as a software house.
Almost 30 years old. Wow.
Yeah, 29 this year. So, and out of that, we grew multiple divisions because all based on customer needs. So we do hardware. Obviously, we do software development. And we have a Microsoft business unit, an AWS business unit as well, and security, and the managed services side. And about 120 odd customers just on the Microsoft side.
Wow.
From a CSP point of view that we look after, and help with Azure, guiding them in the right direction.
So you've really pivoted towards cloud computing.
Yes, on both sides.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky enough where most of our customers stayed 10 years plus, or most of them that we have are 10 years plus. It's good.
Means you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Good. So Preegan, you're Microsoft Azure Product Manager for First Distribution. I think many people know the First Distribution name, but for those who are not intimately familiar with the business, maybe just give us the quick summary.
Sure. So we were founded in 1984. We're a level 1 BE organization with a staff complement of just over 450 employees. We transact throughout Southern Africa, Indian Ocean Islands, and we're ICT distributor. We currently transact over 50 different premium global brands, and we currently service a customer base within the cloud space, specifically in my area, being Azure, of 427 partners across the African and South African spaces.
Okay. So your relationship with Silicon Overdrive?
So Silicon Overdrive is one of our strategic partners who we've partnered up with to overcome many obstacles when it comes to customer relations and customer understanding of the cloud environments, especially helping organizations understand where they can actually evangelize the benefit of cloud computing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So 40 years in business, 29 years in business. We've got plenty of experience in front of us here. We're going to be delving into a very specific topic today, and that is Azure SQL. I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about this because I'm not the expert on SQL databases, and I'm looking forward to learning quite a bit. And Jody, I'm going to start with you. Can you maybe just give us an overview of what exactly Azure SQL is and how it's helping companies with digital transformation?
Yeah, so Azure SQL is the cloud version of the traditional on-prem SQL. Mm-hmm. And Microsoft discovered that they could make it more scalable for customers and to develop products quicker. So you get different flavors of it instead of having to pay for the full license, which would normally cost you a couple of $100K per year, or a couple of million in some people's cases.
Wow.
You could now have just the database portion of it, or you can have a choice between Azure SQL DB, which is just the database portion, or you could have Azure Managed Instance, which is the full version of SQL, just cloud-based, or you can have SQL Hyperscale, which is if you want your... Well, I always tell people that thing runs on black magic, because in some cases we could restore databases, say a 50 terabyte database, which is restored in 7.5 minutes.
Good grief.
Yeah, so that runs on, but that's designed for heavy workloads.
Yes.
Microsoft has also gone and made SQL free, and because they're trying to attract developers or more developers back to SQL, they've done. They've taken essentially 32 gigs of storage you'll get for SQL Azure DB. Mm-hmm. The first 32 gig is free. So if you spin up Azure SQL now in your Azure subscription, and you just go for the free offer, apply free offer, you'll get it for free, and you'll be up and running in a couple of minutes. As well as for SQL Managed Instance, where you could do 500 databases on a managed instance at 64 gigs of space. So the first 64 gig will always be free.
Okay.
And Microsoft has made a commitment to make that for now.
So it allows you to test this technology.
To test. With it. Everything is about getting your MVP out there very quickly. Mm-hmm. What's the saying? Fail fast, hard type of thing. So yes.
Okay. So Preegan, how many South African businesses run SQL databases? And I imagine a lot of those are still on premises. What's the advantage of moving these on-premises SQL databases into a cloud environment?
I think it goes back to some of what Jody's just mentioned. Creating innovation within businesses, creating scalability and affordability is one of the most key things in any business expenditure nowadays. It's always a cost of, my cost of infrastructure versus my return on investments. Mm-hmm. And I think SQL's advantage within the Azure space is allowing customers to adapt to a cloud environment and digitally transform their business with the most minimal financial impact to their businesses, but also at the same time allow them to innovate how they transact businesses, be it any industry they're currently in this day and age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just to add to what Preegan is saying, so you're giving people more flexibility from a financial point of view, in the sense that they're going from a capex model to an opex model, mm-hmm. and they're only spending a portion of what they would have spent by a capex model, and everything is based on a pay-as-you-go model as well. So you can literally shut down Azure SQL in the cloud if you're not using it. So out of the 730 hours that you get billed for per month, mm-hmm. you can actually, if your business if you only operate between 8 and 5, shut it down at 6 o'clock, and mm-hmm. you can automatically start it up the next morning at 7 or 8.
Okay. So there are cost advantages with moving.
100%.
Okay.
But not only cost advantages. I mean, if you look at accessibility, if you look at users transacting with the database for, their job roles on a daily basis, it's just much easier having accessibility from anywhere, any mm-hmm. time, as long as you have the appropriate internet connection and the appropriate security measures in place as well.
Mm-hmm. So companies that have, and there will be companies listening to this show who are sitting with large on-premises SQL Server databases, what's involved in shifting that into the cloud? Is it just a lift and shift, or is it more complicated than that? And to what extent does Microsoft support in helping companies migrate to the cloud?
Jody, you want to take that on?
Yeah, I'll take it. So what Microsoft has done in terms of support for companies to migrate to the cloud, mm-hmm. they allow you to do an assessment, and that is one of the services that FD offers.
Okay.
We will actually do an assessment of your environment. We'll help you build a business case so that you don't just dump money anywhere. And then based on that, we can narrow your workloads. Or when I say narrow, I mean we can consolidate your workloads. So instead of you having 30 SQL servers on-prem, you might just need 3 in cloud. Mm-hmm. And we did that with a couple of companies, state-owned companies, private companies, where the benefit is 10x from a cost perspective over a 5-year period moving to cloud.
10 times cheaper.
10 times cheaper just moving your SQL stuff into cloud.
Wow.
I think also to add in that the proof is in the pudding when it comes to an assessment. Generally, when we execute these assessments as first distribution in Silicon Overdrive, we go through something called the total cost of ownership calculator. This essentially allows an organization to get insight in terms of what their traditional infrastructure would cost over a 1, 3, or even a 5-year period. Mm-hmm. And I think, these are things that help companies make more informed decisions as to their digital transformation, as well as, modernization in the future.
Yeah, and the one thing we can add to that is we can actually give them a timeline as to when they will break even as well.
So there's clear ROI here.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And do companies also use this process to clean up their data? I mean, we know that the volume of data is just increasing exponentially every year. To what extent do companies who go through projects like this utilize it to clean up the data they're sitting on and decide, actually, we don't need all of this stuff that we're hoarding?
I think, Jody, you'd say it more from a reseller aspect.
Through this process, this assessment process, people are actually discovering data that they've been storing for 10 years. And they don't need that much data to actually operate. Mm-hmm. And they learn quickly how to work with that data more efficiently in terms of archiving data, which data do they actually need, which data do they need for government compliance, and how flexible they can cloud makes the data, just shifting that data from a reporting perspective, because they don't need to wait for a 12-hour process to finish on-prem to get your reports. Yeah, you've got a process that now runs, that same process now runs for under an hour. Mm-hmm. And you can get your reports before you get into work.
Okay.
And just by moving, like some companies SQL databases into cloud, we could bring down the reporting. We could automate reporting as well. So instead of people having to come and wait for reports to come in, like in one case, we had a customer that waited 6 years for reports.
6 years?
Yeah, 6 years for their team to get all the data and all that stuff for them. And once we were done, it took us a month to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
We could get it done. They could get the reports before they get into work. And in some cases, we automated board reports as well. Instead of them having to wait for reports to be delivered to them, they could just log in and they could see the reports and then ask questions to the executives about the business instead of waiting for the next board meeting. So it's also speeding up that process for companies.
Making things more efficient.
Yeah.
And saving companies money in the process. Of course, Jody, everyone's conscious in 2024 about information security, or at least they should be. Are there security advantages or even potential pitfalls involved in moving from an on-prem database to a cloud solution?
There is always pitfalls. Right? So people tend to think that because we're moving to Azure or to any cloud provider, they are looking after us.
Someone else will take care of it.
Someone else. That's not the case.
Yeah.
But you still have to take care of your databases. However, Azure does provide you with the tools to make it a lot safer than what it would be on-prem. So if you look at SQL Defender, for example, it allows you out-of-the-box encryption. It can help you detect from where people are trying to access your database from, so it analyzes the access patterns. And then where you also, what scripts are people trying to run against your database. So SQL injection, what they're trying to run, how they're trying to get in, so you can pick up that quickly. And also who within your organization is trying to run stuff. And then you can also apply sensitivity labels to your data. And that is all built in. And the one thing about the Azure, one difference between Azure SQL and on-prem is that you don't have to wait for updates for the new version. Like right now, people are waiting for AI to come, that will be built in, it's coming with SQL 2025 on-prem. That has been in Azure SQL for about a year or two now already. So what Microsoft does is all the new features gets implemented in the cloud versions first. It's tested, run there, tested with real customers, and then released into the on-prem version. And even from there's a big difference is in terms of database recovery, or data recovery, for that matter, where you can now fail over from on-prem into cloud and back. Where previously when you do DR test, I mean, I used to work for one of the big retailers, and when we used to do DR testing, it would take us an entire week to recover just the core system for the company to operate in. I recently did a test for one of our manufacturing customers, and 10 minutes. That was my part of it from a SQL side. I left the other guys there because they had to go all night recovering service.
Is there still going to be a place for on-premise databases, or is it all going to the cloud?
No, look, there will always be a place. I don't think everybody wants to move. And there is some cases where cloud is a bit more expensive than on-prem. But that also depends on your type of application, your business model, and how you streamline that. I mean, we've got some customers that refuse to move, and we can stay off.
On what basis? Why were they reluctant to move?
They're governed that way.
I see.
It's from an industry compliance point of view, they can't move.
Regulation.
So more from a regulation perspective, but it's too much effort for them to jump through those hoops and just spend the money and stay on-prem. So that's where they're at.
Okay. Can you maybe share one or two? I know you've touched on it, but could you maybe share in a little more detail one or two specific use cases or success stories of businesses leveraging Azure SQL?
One of the biggest telecoms companies on the continent, we did the assessment, we built a business case for them. They had about 65 SQL servers on-prem. After we did our assessment, we showed them that they could bring it down to 16 servers. We consolidated them. Yes. We could consolidate their SQL servers for them in the cloud down to 16. We could make the data way more flexible, and from a data strategy point of view, it actually tied in with their business strategy as well. So the data that they needed to achieve their goal of reaching X amount for the financial year, they had access to the right data. Nobody needs to go and dig anymore. But with that also said, their saving was around 7x of what they were currently spending, and I had an ROI of, it was I think 3 years before they get their money, start seeing their money back. So that was one. The other one was semi-government institute in the aviation industry. Yeah, part of the business aviation. We moved them to Azure without any of the systems going down. But from a cost perspective, they had 10 SQL servers on-prem, and the value add for them was just the cost saving alone. That was something like 12x because of a licensing agreement that they signed a couple of years earlier. Kept the price high. We moved them. We tested everything with the reporting as well, because that was the main concern for them. And we could do that within a 3-month period. And then there was also some government departments that we moved over. And they now run completely in Azure. And all the data is they use it much more efficiently now. So much so that they don't have to go back to the legacy systems to go dig for data, because we could integrate those legacy systems as well.
What are some of the hiccups or hurdles that companies encounter going through
moving
to the cloud? Is it fairly straightforward?
I don't say it's, in most cases it's fairly straightforward because of the amount of tools that's being released to assist you to help with that. So before you move, you could download a SQL data migration assistant, run it against your on-prem SQL server. It will tell you what you need to change from a code perspective, which line of code you need to change, what it needs to look like, because you can set your target server to either Azure SQL in a VM, or Azure SQL Managed Instance. And I don't think the problem lies with people not doing their homework first, and if it's a viable solution for them. Some people just go, look, the boss said we need to go cloud, we go cloud. And then they wake up with, come end of the month, they get a lovely, lovely hefty bill of a couple of $100K, and they wonder why. And that is basically because they didn't use the right tools. Like if you go in, you can use Azure Migrate as well. You can say, I want to migrate to this version of SQL. This is the amount of data I have. And you don't actually have to stamp stack. You could actually just point it to your on-prem SQL server. It will do an analysis and tell you this is the right SKU for you. This is the right costing for you. And this is what it will actually cost. And if you have a software assurance or an enterprise agreement, you generally have what's called a Azure hybrid benefit, which allows you for discounts up to, I think if you choose a 3-year reserve instance for any of the SQL skills, you get up to 55% off.
57 now.
Oh, even more. I mean, that's how Coca-Cola moved off SAP into SQL because of that 57% saving. I mean, that's massive for them.
Yes.
So those are the type of saving if you do your homework properly and migrate to Azure SQL. That's the type of savings you're looking at.
But it sounds, Preegan, that companies shouldn't go into this blindfolded. They need to consider why they're doing it, have a strategy, and do it properly and methodically. Otherwise, you're asking for trouble.
100%. You know, when it comes to SQL or any database management for that case, when you're doing any activity towards a migration towards the cloud, it's all about your planning.
Right.
You know, you need to understand the timelines, the impact that it's going to have. Because when you migrate or you lift and shift any environment to the cloud, there's also a productivity impact that a lot of customers face. You know, a lot of the time in the Azure or the cloud space, we always recommend that a migration happens during an off-peak period or, you know, whenever your services are not used. And, you know, it goes back to Jody's point of awareness. A lot of the time people will come through and say, cool, we want to move to SQL in Azure. But they don't understand what it actually involves to move their current environment over. And every customer varies. There is pretty much, and I'm not sure if you agree with me, there's no two customers that are the same in terms of config, in terms of infrastructure, or the services that they use on a daily basis. So planning is imperative in this process.
Okay. Jody, lastly, you've mentioned that companies have options when moving to SQL on Azure. Let me try and get this right. Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and Azure SQL, and SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machines. Just to take us through those three options and why companies would consider one over another.
I'd go, if I have for example, a restaurant reservation system, but I need a single database or web app for web app, I'll use Azure SQL DB. Mm-hmm. If I have multiple applications that I need multiple databases for, I'll use SQL Managed Instance because I can store more data on there. And also I can control my IOPS better. And then SQL Virtual Machines, if I want to move my legacy SQL, so some people still run SQL 2008, or in worst case, SQL 2005 service on-prem, and they don't want to just migrate the data over. They first want to lift and shift, typically. First get it into the cloud, and then once they're there on a VM, then they'll start looking at modernizing that workload. And that typically customers move there because they want to take it, they've determined that it will maybe take them a year or more to modernize that data. But now there were the things that Microsoft has brought in, AI for data management.
Okay.
And
how does that work?
Copilot.
Okay.
So they use the OpenAI services in there. We've actually, with a partner in Canada, built something around that. But in GitHub, you can go and you can actually build your own to manage your data. And where that comes in, it helps you free up about what we found over the last year is about 60 to 70% of the DBA's time. And I've used it personally with...
That's significant.
Yeah, no, it's significant in terms of cost. I did it with a customer where we quoted 120 hours to deliver a lot of work for. And then I remembered, but I've got this fancy tool. And I did all the work in 4 hours, including my documentation. So the customer saves money. We're more efficient. The customer stays with us. So
sounds like an absolute no-brainer to me.
Yeah, so they can go... So guys can go and build their own.
Yeah.
From GitHub, if they go look in the Microsoft library in GitHub, or they can contact us because we've got one very fancy one that we've built with AI. What we do assessments for customers with, because we can even pick up their code and fix their code. And that's also another thing that we find that people don't optimize before moving to cloud is their code. Because they might move to cloud and they say, no, but cloud is slower. It's not that the cloud is slower. Your code
is bad.
Yeah.
Fix it.
So we typically help them with that as well.
Okay.
But I mean, there's just in the final to add, there's a lot of resources available, free resources for anybody to learn. And that is the Microsoft communities in South Africa. So every second Tuesday of the month, or the first second Tuesday of the month, they all meet at Microsoft's offices. So you've got Data Platform, which covers all the SQL and the BI stuff. You've got the Azure user group, the Business Apps user group, which covers Power Apps and Dynamics. You've got the Microsoft Developer UG. That also happens, so that's all for developers. And there's a whole bunch of events now upcoming from those user groups in January, and everything is free.
Okay.
I think in addition to that, there's also self-paced learning platforms that, a normal individual can simply log on, register with Microsoft, and enable themselves to understand these new technologies out in the markets.
Now, if you're keen to delve into this topic more, Preegan and I will be doing 2 follow-up sessions on this show, so look out for those episodes coming soon. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to learn more about Silicon Overdrive, what is your website address?
www.overdrive.co.za.
Overdrive.co.za, and FD?
It's firstdistribution.com.
Preegan, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Likewise,
in our next 2 episodes. Preegan Chetty is Microsoft Azure Product Manager at First Distribution, and Jody Roberts is Microsoft Business Executive at Silicon Overdrive. And I thank both of you for your time today and for sharing your valuable insights with our audience.
Thank you for having me.